A moment later, housekeeper Deborah's call rang out, and finally the door opened. Seeing Sienna lying on the bed, Deborah felt a mix of worry and impatience. The young lady was sound asleep again, locked in without asking for help, even planning to sleep in. Sienna honestly admitted, "No one came to help me." Deborah, feeling resentful, asked, "Did you think I was bored by you so you didn't need to be saved?" Sienna remained silent, urging her to quickly prepare as she was about to leave. "Everyone's waiting impatiently," Deborah grumbled, complaining under her breath. Michael was a bit worried, wondering if something had happened to Sienna. Meanwhile, the Earl and his mother exchanged a triumphant glance. Finally, Sienna and Deborah arrived, only to face harsh criticism. Deborah immediately knelt down and apologized, explaining to the Duke why Sienna was late. "Mrs. Late because of the guests present today. It's the great day of the struggle for Jarus. But the girl was delayed." The Countess, concerned, asked, "Which guest could it be? We don't usually entertain guests like that." Deborah explained that it had been her responsibility to care for the guests these past few days. She had assigned another servant to look after the young lady, but unfortunately Sienna had been neglected and hadn't been fed. Hearing that his daughter had been mistreated, the Duke became furious. "How dare they treat Sienna so cruelly?" he demanded. Whispers spread throughout the room, and people began to murmur in sympathy. Letting such a frail child go hungry was unthinkable, and everyone began to feel sorry for Sienna. Deborah continued, "Miss is late because the new servant locked her in her room." She confessed it had been done on the Countess's orders to prevent Sienna from joining the competition. Deborah also mentioned that the Countess promised the servant 100 gold coins if the plan succeeded. Feeling exposed, the Countess's wife quickly denied the accusation. "How could we do such an evil thing? Are you claiming the housekeeper is slandering us?" The Duke's cold gaze silenced her, and the Countess flinched under his stare. At that moment, the priest presiding over the ceremony spoke up. "The competition cannot be cancelled. Let the ceremony begin." As the tension simmered, Asel added, "After the fight, there will still be penalties. If you fail, the consequences will be even more dire. Even if Isabelle wins and becomes the owner of the Nata name, she will still be prosecuted to the end." Isabelle, hearing the Duke's resolute stance, began to feel a twinge of fear. The Countess, noticing her unease, tried to console her. "You just need to show that you're stronger than that orphan. Everything will be easily resolved." Isabelle nodded, trying to calm herself. "I just need to prove I'm stronger than her. Everyone will forget how they treated her and reevaluate me." With a sharp glance, Isabelle approached Sienna and whispered fiercely, "Just like you. You dare challenge me?" Sienna, confused, replied innocently, "I made no attempt to participate in the challenge. Didn't you invite me?" The moment Sienna finished speaking, Isabelle's anger boiled over. Her eyes were filled with darkness and malice. Sienna flinched, startled by the intensity of Isabelle's glare. At this point, the showdown began. The magician announced the rules of the game. The Jaro artifact would choose its owner. If you were refused, you would have to bear the consequences. Once you became the owner of the name, it meant you had achieved the honor of being the protector of humanity, a title that would never change. Isabelle, looking nervous, stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the holy water jar containing the Jaro artifact. The Countess, equally anxious, held her breath. As Isabelle reached out to place her hand in the jar, a powerful force immediately pushed her back. The challenge was over. She had failed. The Countess was stunned. "Let me try again," she begged, despite Isabelle's warnings. She placed her hand in the jar once more, but this time a stronger force knocked her to the ground. Both mother and daughter were defeated, their hopes dashed. The consequences of arrogance, combined with failure, were severe. They would now have to face punishment for their attempt to harm Sienna. Now it was Sienna's turn to challenge the Jaro artifact. Asel and Michael watched with extreme concern. Sienna took a deep breath and slowly placed her hand into the holy water jar. There was silence. Nothing happened. It seemed that in her previous life, Lorena had been harmed after touching the Jaro artifact because she had 2 streams of magic power in her body. Now, with only 1 stream, nothing occurred. Sienna felt a twinge of disappointment but was relieved. Just as she was about to withdraw her hand, a voice suddenly rang in her ears. Don't go, the voice echoed again. Sienna looked around, but no one reacted. Maybe she had heard wrong. It seemed like she had failed the challenge after all. What are you talking about? You didn't fail, the voice rang out again. Sienna hesitated, then responded, Could this be his arrows? That's right. For 2,000 years I have been waiting for you, my first master. Sienna, overwhelmed, withdrew her hand and turned to leave. She just wanted to be a normal person. Someone who could eat and sleep well, without the burden of being the protector of humanity. She wasn't ready for such responsibility. She lied, claiming her hand hurt and that she had failed the challenge. However, his arrows seemed to easily ignore her. Suddenly, the gem in the water leapt up, glowing with a brilliant fire. Sienna heard a fierce roar. I told you not to go! The sacred fire exploded violently, and everyone in the room was stunned. Asel and Michael moved forward to help, but the Duke held them back. Wait. Fiery snakes surged towards Sienna. The fire surrounded her, but instead of burning, it didn't feel hot at all. The intense flames shrank down into a small, controlled flame. This was his arrows. Sienna wanted to give up, thinking again, I never said I wanted to be your master. A mocking laugh echoed. Do you think I have enough free time to ask for your opinion? I'm not the first destiny you've met. Don't compare me to others. Sienna felt confused. She had never met another fate she didn't understand. The voice, taunting her, continued, Why don't you want to sign a contract with me? You know you don't want to be my master. Sienna opened her mouth to explain, but her vision began to blur. Her body weakened, and she lost consciousness. The divine artifact that others coveted, the girl dodged again, only because she wanted to live a normal life. Yet, as she struggled with his arrows, she fainted. It was then revealed that the new mage relies on instinct to cast their first spell. This moment of enlightenment could determine the direction of their magical future. Based on the scale and trend of her magic, it was clear. Sienna's future lay in evolution. She would become an excellent healing magician. Everyone congratulated the Duke. After all, healing magicians were incredibly valuable. They could rescue others from evil spirits. But what surprised them even more was Sienna. Not only had she dispelled the evil spirit that had lingered in the Nata palace for years, something no other healing magician had been able to do, but her evolving powers brought even more magic. She even summoned spring in the midst of cold winter, bringing life where there had been none. It was unforgettable. Let Sienna rest, the Duke told everyone, signalling them to retreat. There was still the trial of the Count and his mother to prepare for. Once everyone had left, the Duke turned to Sienna and told her to open her eyes. It turned out there had been too many people watching, and Sienna, ever sensitive, had avoided opening them. The Duke understood, giving her the space she needed. Alone, Sienna couldn't help but sigh. This time it's completely over. The thought of her life's end felt overwhelming. What's the end of life? His arrow's voice rang out, jumping into the conversation with a tone of complaint. The small flame stretched, waving and smiling with satisfaction. At last! I don't have to hide as a necklace anymore. Sienna, feeling frustrated, muttered, I signed a contract alone after making someone else faint. It's so forced. His arrows grumbled in response. You put your hand into the water of evolution. That's an ancient custom for signing contracts. You did it yourself, meaning you asked to sign the contract. I agreed to your request. This is a fair and public signing ceremony. There's no backing out now. Sienna knew there was no point in arguing. She immediately changed the subject, asking, What does the Nacho Evolution Palace mean? The small flame glowed with pride. "This is my gift to you. Surprised? You should be. I've performed such powerful magic. From now on, no one would dare rob her again." But Sienna had a headache. She didn't want to stand out like this. Despite the strong magical powers in this life, she didn't want all the attention. She just wanted a simple, quiet life. His arrows, in the form of a fire, weakened slightly. "Are you planning to leave me?" "Don't even dream of it. You and I are in an eternal contract. I'm doing this for your own good." Sienna didn't even know that those infected by the evil spirits were dangerously close. She responded, realizing the truth. "It turns out the Count and his mother have changed their personalities and committed many evil acts. As expected, it's connected to those dark auras." At that moment, the two criminals, the Count and his mother, were kneeling on the ground, trembling. They couldn't understand why they had done such cruel things. The powerful Duke Nata stood over them with an expressionless face. The Earl and his mother, once proud and arrogant, now cowered, kneeling in fear for daring to harm the Duke's pampered adopted daughter. Now they faced the Duke's judgment. The Count, still confused, thought, "Why did I suddenly become so stupid? Why did I harm others? What made me do such things?" But when they saw the fire of his arrows, the realization hit them. Their bodies were definitely affected, but it was too late now. The Duke had the right to execute them. "No matter how you explain it, it's useless," the Duke said coldly. The Countess, desperate, begged the Duke. "This was all caused by me alone." Isabelle, unaware of the full situation, also pleaded with the Duke to spare her life, but the Duke had no intention of showing mercy. He wanted to use their deaths as a warning. Nata would show no mercy to any criminal. The cold blade reflected the woman's desperate face. "Spare your life," the Duke muttered. At that moment, Sienna arrived at the scene. Asile was surprised to see her. "Why did the bodyguard let the lady come here?" Sienna explained calmly. "I came by myself. Please don't scold the servant." After hearing this, Asile didn't say anything further. This response surprised everyone present. As expected, Sienna was the master of his arrows, making the others listen in awe. The Duke took back his sword, his cold eyes turning to Sienna. The look in his eyes reminded her of her previous life. The fake older sister, Lorena, who had falsely accused Sienna, making everyone believe she used evil magic to harm her. No matter how much Sienna tried to explain, the Duke had locked her in prison. The Duke's gentle voice broke through Sienna's thoughts, pulling her back to reality. "What's wrong?" Sienna tried to calm herself before speaking. His arrows told her that the Earl and his mother had been invaded by evil spirits, which was why they had acted the way they did. As soon as she spoke these words, murmurs rippled through the crowd. "No wonder their actions were so unusual," someone whispered. "Without Sienna's intervention, I'm afraid the evil spirits would have fully taken over, and they would have gone mad." It turned out that his arrow's words were highly trustworthy. At that moment, Asile asked Sienna, "Why did you save the Earl and his mother? The noble adopted daughter was almost murdered, yet you prevented the execution of criminals at the last minute. I don't understand." Though the Earl and his mother were influenced by evil spirits and did bad things, they still threatened you. Why save them? Sienna replied calmly, "I'm not here to save them, and I don't have that ability either. I just don't think we should hide the truth. As for how they should be handled, it's not up to an orphan like me to decide. That's for the Duke to decide." The Duke pondered for a moment before delivering a new verdict. He decided that the Earl and his mother would have to give Sienna half of the mining shares from the Count's palace as compensation for damages. It was a lenient punishment. The Count's palace, in turn, expressed gratitude to Sienna for her actions. Isabelle, recalling Sienna's life-saving intervention, vowed, "I will repay this favour." Sienna glanced at the share contract, her eyes widening. It turned out the mine wasn't just about ordinary gems. It also contained gem essences that could create magic. These essences could be used to engrave cleansing spells or make powerful amulets, making the mine extremely valuable. Sienna hesitated, not wanting to accept it. It's too expensive, she thought. In her previous life, this mine had belonged to Isabelle, and she had lost it to Lorena in an underground fight. Now, compensation for Lorena's loss had placed this massive fortune in Sienna's hands. She feared that accepting it might lead to disaster. Asel, sensing her reluctance, advised, "You should take it. This is an inseparable asset for the magician who owns the name. Perhaps the Duke or Grand Master could accept it for you?" At that moment, the Duke suddenly stood up, his gaze fixed on Sienna. "You are no longer an orphan," he said sincerely. "You are the owner of the name Jaros. With that title comes great privilege, but also great responsibility." His words hit Sienna hard, leaving her feeling an immense sense of pressure. Sienna was taken aback by the Duke's words. "So, Sienna, if you still want to give up your responsibility, then just leave," he said calmly. "We can live as we please. You don't have to care about other people's opinions. The freedom that Nasha guarantees you, even I cannot violate it. So from now on, don't say you're an orphan anymore. Nasha will always be behind you." Sienna was utterly surprised. The Duke's expression was sincere, and there was even a hint of mercy in his tone. For a moment she was stunned. It seemed that the things from her past life were not meant to happen in this one. She was the only one bound by those memories. Could she really forget the unforgettable pains of her past? Could she begin a new life calmly, without those haunting memories? She couldn't do it. There was no apology or remorse for what had happened. She couldn't forgive easily. She would rather carry those memories with her for the rest of her life. Although the Earl's government had compensated her, it wasn't over yet. Before she could focus on that, Deborah had discovered a bottle of poison that could temporarily suppress magical powers. The origins of this drug were unclear, just as the source of the evil spirits affecting the Count and his mother remained a mystery. Everything needed to be thoroughly investigated. Late at night, Michael found himself in a familiar room. A man was pacing nervously in front of him, muttering curses. "This is so arrogant. Doesn't even want to see him. I don't understand why my father brought that child to the palace." Michael sat frozen in the chair, unable to move. Who is that person? He wondered. The man turned around, and when Michael saw his face, he was shocked to realize that it was himself. He woke up startled, realizing he had just dreamt about his future. He broke out in a cold sweat. Who is the person I hate so much in my dream? And who is the girl who keeps flashing in my mind? Seth, meanwhile, congratulated Sienna on becoming a healing mage. "Thank you for bringing spring to my palace. Even though I didn't see that moment myself, I feel the blessing. I'm very happy." Seth looked at Sienna, feeling reassured by her growth. He also secretly admired the Duke's wise decision. Before that, someone had suggested that the Duke hold a victory party and publicly reveal Sienna's identity as a healing mage. However, the Duke chose to keep it a secret. He explained that Sienna wasn't used to being recognized as Natcha's daughter, and he forbade any outsiders from making contact with her. The nobles who had hoped to use her position to climb higher in society were worried. With the Duke pampering Sienna so much, how would they find opportunities to flatter her? But the Duke didn't make it difficult for them. Instead, he provided all sorts of extravagant gifts, toys, books, and treasures gilded with gold and inlaid with pearls. These were all gifts from the nobility. However, the Duke insisted that they be returned. At the time, Seth didn't fully understand, but now, seeing Sienna's smile, he realized that the Duke had wanted to protect her. His actions had been thoughtfully planned out. Since Sienna had become a healing mage, she would be required to attend military school once she turned 14. So, Seth began teaching her the basics. This was exactly what Sienna had been hoping for. She eagerly took notes as Seth explained the principles of shamanic healing. Seeing how attentively Sienna listened to the lecture, Seth decided not to assign homework. However, to his surprise, Sienna was a bit disappointed. "Actually, doing homework is quite interesting," she admitted. This was the first time Seth had ever heard a student speak so positively about assignments. It was as if the great master had accidentally exposed a weakness in his own teaching approach. Forced to teach, Seth's tiring and painful career as a mentor began. But now, with a student like Sienna, diligent and eager to learn, his once gloomy life was finally beginning to shine with hope. Miss Sienna is a great student, Seth thought, touched by her hard-working spirit. She truly was an angel. One person was attracted by the wit and humour in the teacher's teaching style. The harmonious teacher-student relationship was simply adorable. "Okay, what homework do you want, miss?" "As long as it's assigned by the teacher, any assignment is fine." Just then Michael walked in and saw this scene. "Are you two crazy? Should we invite a doctor to take a look at both of you?" he joked. Deborah smiled. The two of them are just very passionate about knowledge. This was Michael's first time seeing Sienna smile so happily. At mealtime, Sienna often lost interest in studying and would start to feel sleepy. Michael couldn't help but remind her, "Stay awake. After eating, we're going out." This woke Sienna up immediately. "Let's go shopping on the street," she said. In their previous life, at the orphanage, the headmaster was afraid they would cause trouble, so he didn't allow them to go out. In Natcha, there were only days off, and she had only gone out a few times with Luna. Seeing Michael's mischievous smile, Sienna felt that if she agreed, it would be like losing a battle. She noticed his smile, and then, suddenly, something flashed in Michael's mind. He vaguely remembered a scene from the past, a girl lying there quietly. It was the same girl, harmed by her cruel sister and dying unjustly. "I thought I could finally escape a life of not being loved by anyone," he thought.